A very good morning, friends. So, I hope you're all safe as well as healthy. Well, in this particular month, I have been making some videos on Ind AS 12, and in the previous couple of videos, I have been discussing as far as the calculation of a tax base of an asset and liability is concerned. Well, if you recall the 5-step model which I gave you first of all, the step number 1 is to calculate a carrying amount of the asset and liability. And then we go to the step number 2 and we calculate a tax base for the asset and liability. Now the question what comes to the mind is, can there be a situation where the asset or liability does not have a carrying amount, and in spite of that we are going to calculate a tax base for the asset and liability? Well, the answer is yes. So let's, I think, look at what the standard is going to say. Para number 9 of Ind AS 12 has given us insight regarding the example of a particular item, you can say, where the carrying amount is not there, but there is still a tax base. Let's find this out in this particular video. 25th June 12 बजे एक स्कॉलरशिप एग्जामिनेशन कंडक्ट होने जा रहा है फॉर सीए आर्टिकल्स बाय अनअकैडमी। इसके अंदर सी इंटरमीडिएट के जो स्टूडेंट्स हैं और जो वर्किंग आर्टिकल्स हैं, आप पार्टिसिपेट कर सकते हैं इस स्कॉलरशिप एग्ज़ाम के अंदर। और आपको मैं एडवांटेजेस बता दूं कि आपको क्या क्या एडवांटेजेस इसके अंदर मिलेंगे। सबसे पहले कॉम्प्लीमेंट्री आपको 7 डेज फ्री ट्रायल इसके अंदर मिलेगा, यानी अनअकैडमी के लिए आपको 7 डेज का फ्री ट्रायल मिलेगा। इसके अलावा जब आप इस स्कॉलरशिप एग्जाम के अंदर पार्टिसिपेट करेंगे तो रैंकिंग्स के बेसिस पर आपकी अगर पहली रैंक आती है तो आपको स्कॉलरशिप और साथ में आपको गिफ्ट वाउचर मिलेगा वर्थ 5000। अगर आपकी रैंक 2 या 3 आती है तो आपको इसके अंदर स्कॉलरशिप मिलेगी प्लस आपको 4000 का गिफ्ट वाउचर मिलेगा। अगर आपकी रैंक 4 टू रैंक 10 आती है तो भी आपको स्कॉलरशिप और इसके अंदर 3000 का गिफ्ट वाउचर मिलेगा। घबराइए नहीं, बल्कि आपकी अगर रैंक 11 टू 50th आती है तो भी आपको स्कॉलरशिप मिलेगी 40%, और अगर रैंक 51 टू 100 आती है तो भी आपको 30% स्कॉलरशिप मिलेगी। यानी पार्टिसिपेशन पर आपको इसके अंदर 7 डेज ट्रायल मिलेगा। और ये जो स्कॉलरशिप आप अवेल कर सकते हैं, यू कैन अवेल इट ऑन सीए इंटर ग्रुप 2, यू कैन अवेल इट ऑन सीए फाइनल ग्रुप 1, सीए फाइनल ग्रुप 2, इनमें से किसी पर भी आप ये स्कॉलरशिप अवेल कर सकते हैं। तो भाई तारीख नोट कीजिए, 25 जून 12 बजे, और इस स्कॉलरशिप एग्जाम के अंदर पार्टिसिपेट कीजिए। यदि आप अनअकैडमी पर नए हैं तो आप इस टेस्ट को अनलॉक कर सकते हैं, मेरा कोड इस्तेमाल कर सकते हैं CAKB10। तो भाई किस बात का इंतजार है, नीचे डिस्क्रिप्शन बॉक्स में लिंक मिलेगा, आइए लेट्स क्रैक इट। Para number 9 tells us an example of an item where the carrying amount is not in the balance sheet but still it's got a tax base. I think let's first of all understand the concept. Imagine a company incurs a preliminary expense. Now if you look at things from the point of view of accounting, as per Ind AS 38, para number 69, if you incur any preliminary expenses, it is immediately regarded as a revenue expenditure. That means if there are any preliminary expenses, let's say a company incurs 1 lakh rupees of preliminary expense, the entire 1 lakh rupees is taken to the profit and loss in the same year in which it is incurred. But if you look at things from the income tax point of view, I guess section 35D would allow you a 1/5 deduction every year as you go to, when you incur the expenditure. So 1/5 is allowed every year. So 1 lakh rupees is recorded as an expense in accounting immediately, but in taxation you've recorded only 1/5, that's 20,000. So there is another 80,000 which you are going to get as a future deduction. Now, when you are creating a company and you're spending the preliminary expenses, one thing is pretty sure, that you are creating a company, so naturally economic benefits would arise. Once the company gets created, you will definitely get economic benefits, and those economic benefits are going to be taxable. And against the taxable economic benefits, you are going to claim the preliminary expense under the Income Tax Act. So which means I am going to get a future deduction of 80,000, though the carrying amount is 0. So in this example, the carrying amount is nil, but the tax base is the future deduction, which is 80,000, resulting in a difference between the carrying amount and the tax base. Though I've not covered that yet, but we can say that once the carrying amount of the asset is less as compared to the tax base, it gives rise to what we call a deductible temporary difference. And this deductible temporary differences would result in a creation of a DTA. So in my example, if I consider a tax rate of 30%, 80,000 is the difference, and a 30% would mean 24,000. If you read the para number 9, the same example is given. It says preliminary expenses are recognized as an expense in determining the accounting period in which they are incurred. Because Index 38 tells you to take the expense immediately. But it says it may not be permitted as a deduction until a later period. So section 35D would allow the expense to be taken 1/5 every year. The difference between a tax base, which is the amount of deduction in the future periods, in my example 80,000, and the carrying amount, which is nil, is going to result in a deductible temporary differences, and that would result in a DTA. So this is one example which is given where the carrying amount of the item is 0, but it's still got a tax base. This has got another interesting connotation. This means that when I'm applying Index 12, I need to be careful. I just can't only concentrate on the balance sheet of the company. I should also dig into the items which might have been taken completely in the income statement, because this would indirectly involve an income statement approach. Looking at the items of income and expenses which have been fully recorded in the accounting income statement, but they are going to be spread over a period of time in taxation. So that would lead to the third case. So we have seen the case number 1 earlier in the videos, that there is a tax base of an asset with a carrying amount. There is a tax base for a liability which has got a carrying amount, and in this video we're looking at the third case, the tax base of the asset and liability which does not have a carrying amount. That's all in this particular video. Thank you for watching. Bye bye and take care.